national security advisor, and I asked him, I said, you know, we're going to weigh the Roman Empire. I said, but isn't that what really kind of helped the Ottoman Empire? Isn't that what happened? And I asked him to look into the parallels, and he, of course, did, because he's remarkable. Buck Sexton is here now. Buck, can you take me take me through the parallels and the 5th century of Rome, if you will?
Well, as we were discussing, it was, of course, a Christian empire at that time, and it was divided into two. In fact, I have a map, as I'm fond of doing, in which I could show you just exactly what we're talking about here. This is the Christian world in the 5th century going into the 6th century. Now, what's interesting, of course, is it's broken up into the Western and Eastern empires. Now, Glenn, one of the questions, of course, why was it breaking up, and also how is it eroding from within? Because we know that from here, from the Arabian Peninsula, Muhammad and then the first caliphs, the Rashidun caliphs, were able to take this entire Christian area in a very short period of time. Why was that? It was because it eroded from the inside. The Romans had an overextended military. They had debased their currency to pay off their debts. They had a bureaucracy that essentially was living as a parasite on the entirety of the Roman people. It became huge, unwieldy, too many regulations, too many laws. All of a sudden, they were operating only for their own...
Hang on, Buck. I'm having a hard time getting my arms around that. That sounds completely foreign to what we might be facing. I've never heard anything like that.
Where could this ever happen?
Yeah, I know.
So they had that. They also had loss of control over their borders. Now, up from this area coming down, you have the Goths, the Ostrogoths, the Visigoths. They had forces along here. Limitanae, they were called. They were essentially the border forces, but they were completely overwhelmed by some of the major groups that came in here. They called them barbarians, from a Greek word, actually, for barbarian. And then you had the Vandals, and they started to take control of these areas, leading up to the eventual fall of Rome. The Eastern Empire lasted longer, but suffered from the same problems. Again, a bureaucracy that was far too big, the erosion of a political culture, Glenn. It no longer meant anything particularly good to be a citizen. It meant that you were subject to capricious laws, to rulers who only existed for their own benefit. Your life was essentially at the whim of outside invaders and outside forces at any point in time, and you had no rights other than excessive taxation and regulation on your life. That's what caused this whole thing to be essentially set up for the complete collapse of this in a very short amount of time.
Okay, so my theory here, Buck, was that we are looking at a time now, much like this, where the entire West is basically the Roman Empire. And when it collapses, it will be just gobbled up and eaten by a new caliphate. Can you take us to what happened then, and I mean the parallels?
Sure. Well, what happens here is, you see, Rome falls, the barbarians essentially take it, and it disintegrates from the power that it was. The Eastern Empire, actually, the Byzantine Empire, with Constantinople as the capital, that lasted a bit longer. But Glenn, as we know, in the 7th century, during the life of the Prophet Muhammad, what was going on in these areas, Constantinople, Antioch, Jerusalem, Alexandria, where the Coptic Christians, of course, were first formed, they all were in a state of disarray. They had schisms among each other. They weren't unified ideologically, politically, or otherwise. They were picked off one by one by the first round of by the first caliphate. Now, what's interesting also is that they pushed all the way across here.
Stop. Please repeat what you just said about why the Christians were picked off. Please repeat that.
Well, this is something that's very little known, Glenn. The Christians were actually fighting against each other in a sense. There were some Christians who were willing to work with, particularly on the frontiers, work with the Muslim invaders, if you will, against other Christians. Also, there were schismatics. There were ideological differences that separated these groups in the 5th century, in the 6th century, such as we had all of a sudden these different Christian sects. We had Chaldean Christians, Coptic Christians, Nestorian Christians, and they didn't see each other necessarily.
I bet you they were saying, if I may, in modern language, well, they're not really Christians, we're Christians. And so it doesn't matter, they're not going to, right?
That's exactly right. There was a lot of animosity between these groups. But Glenn, it fell so quickly. The empire, what had been the greatest empire really in the known world to that point, fell so quickly, and they got as far, just people always forget about this, as Tours in France. Charles Martel in 732 turns back the Cordovan Emirate, which was based out of Spain. They still, by the way, think a lot of hardline Islamists will refer to this place as Andalusia, as Spain as Andalusia. So, no, what's really interesting here is that all these patriarchates, all these major cities, which, by the way, now we, of course, think of as being Muslim, they're not thought of as Christian cities, and many of the cathedrals that weren't burned or destroyed were turned into mosques. These lacked the political unity. They were part of the rot that spread from Rome, essentially, which was, again, this bureaucracy, this destruction of a political culture, such that they were easy prey for the caliphate. They were easy prey for these invaders, and they fell very quickly.
Okay, Buck, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Here's what I want to beg you. Go back and listen to what he just said. Is playing its history always repeats itself, and we must not be people who say, well, they're not really Christian, or they're not really this, or they're not really on my side, or well, they're Jewish and I'm not. Stop it. Stop it. We are going to be picked off one at a time. Oh, well, he's libertarian and I'm more of a social conservative. Stop it. Are you for the freedom of man? Yes or no? It's time to get into the boats together.
Live, this is One for the Record. I'm Diana, and today is October 21st, 2013. Here is your news updates for today. The Watchers watching the world. Moderate M1.0 solar flare erupted from region 1875. Category 3 Hurricane Raymond impacts western Mexico. Typhoon Lakima aims northern Mariana Islands. An Arctic ozone hole reaches maximum size for 2013. Annual Orinid meteor shower peaks tonight. So heads up on all that. Okay. Nothing new on the Extinction Protocol 2012 and beyond. Let's go to the E&E News, Energy News. Guess we'll go to U.S. Canada first. We'll do that one first. Let's see here. Alrighty. Newspapers. Fukushima problems causing concern in U.S. as radionuclides cross Pacific. EPA no comment on projections of radioactive plume hitting West Coast. California residents beg officials to act. EPA no comment. No comment. Wow. Also CBS. Evening News. Nuclear engineer fired. Warning about blasts very similar to explosion you saw at Fukushima in U.S. Comparison left out when aired by CBS this morning. Heads up on that. Wow. Alright, let's go to E&E News, Fukushima, Japan. Alrighty. Nuclear engineer pyrophoric fire may have already occurred at Fukushima Unit 4 spent fuel pool. Explosion possibly due to rods not being covered with water. Okay, so they're saying it already happened. Wow. The worst scenario already happened, but it's still getting worse. New breaches at Fukushima flowing into Pacific. New York Times, it's most likely radioactive particles scattered on ground, possibly by explosions. LA Times, already 60 billion becquerels going directly into ocean every day. Heads up. Fukushima workers, there was a collapse at plant due to typhoon. Not revealed by TEPCO. Worried that upcoming storm to cause more damage. Heads up, they're saying there was some kind of a collapse at the plant, but they're not giving any information out about it. Powerful Typhoon Francisco on track for Fukushima. Typhoon Lakima develops in Pacific. Concerned storms may collide. It's called the Fujiwara effect. Both could hit east coast of Japan later in the week, meaning it's just going to desolate whatever's left over there. LA Times. Plutonium having melted and dropping somewhere is suspected to be causing contamination of underground water at Fukushima. Japan nuclear professor. Also today, Japan Times. Plague of radioactive water from Fukushima will need monitoring for next 100 years. Maybe even longer. WSJ. Alarm over recent TEPCO alert could be quite bad. Yttrium. Whatever. YTTRIUM. Yttrium at 200,000 becquerels per liter in groundwater. See, there's all these different types of, from radioactive xenon, all types of things that we never hear about. It's every kind, A to Z, radionuclides. So, stay tuned. I'm attaching a bunch of stuff on Fukushima and some other things. Alrighty then, take care. Be prepared for anything. I still say if you're by the West Coast, I think it's time to move, don't you? What do you think's going to happen if you stay there? You don't think the wind comes in that way too? It's not just the water. It's coming off the wind. The wind's blowing across the top of the water, going right in, and goes back out, and those Santa Anas. What's going to be in those? Going out and then coming back in. You see what I'm saying? If you stay there, then you did it to yourself on purpose. Get what I'm saying? Alrighty then. Good thing I heard the call and I got off my boat. Came across the country. Wow. Along with other people I see here. Alrighty then, take care. Be prepared for anything. And I'll talk to you tomorrow. Just be safe. Alrighty then, don't eat fish from the Pacific Ocean. You got it? Don't eat fish, and don't give it to your pets. Check your pet food where it's coming out of. Alrighty then, take care.
Workers at Fukushima Daiichi have another challenge on their hands. Heavy rains over northeastern Japan have caused more spills of water at the nuclear plant, and some of it may have reached the Pacific Ocean. More than 100 millimeters of rain fell on Sunday. The water built up inside barriers surrounding storage tanks, and workers discovered spills in at least 12 locations. The rains eased, then the water stopped flowing over the barriers. But workers are looking into the possibility that it may have made its way through ditches and into the ocean. The barriers are 30 centimeters high, but rain a few days ago had pushed water levels in some areas above 20 centimeters, and workers can only pump out a few centimeters per day. They say they checked the water for radioactivity to ensure it met safety standards. Then they released some of it into the compound. They went through the same process last Wednesday after a typhoon brought heavy rains.
Now we're going to head over to Asia, where we have a super typhoon called Typhoon Francisco. They call it a typhoon. Same thing for us, it's a hurricane. But right now it is sitting right off the coast of Japan, and you can see it's expected to come in as about a Cat 1 as we get into Thursday afternoon. But right now a Cat 4 is what we're looking at.
Now, although the Japanese government has vowed to come up with measures to tackle the radioactive water leak, the situation may be worse than thought, as studies from last year indicate that radioactive water will contaminate the entire Pacific Ocean in just 6 years.
Well, another typhoon may be headed toward Japan, and the self-defense forces want to be sure they're ready. Commanders sent more than 400 personnel to an island south of Tokyo after Typhoon Wipa hit last week. The rains caused heavy flooding on Izu Oshima. Parts of a mountain at its center slid over several neighborhoods. The landslides killed at least 27 people. SDF personnel are searching for 19 other residents who are still missing. Another 500 SDF personnel will arrive on the island over the next few days. Forecasters say Typhoon Francisco could hit Japan later this week.
Residents of typhoon-ravaged Izu-Oshima Island south of Tokyo are evacuating their homes due to the threat of more landslides. Weather officials say that Typhoon Francisco is approaching and could bring more heavy rainfall. The town of Oshima issued evacuation advisories on Saturday afternoon to more than 1,200 households in 2 communities on the island. Town officials say about 1,000 residents are taking shelter in 6 evacuation centers. Heavy rainfall from Typhoon Wipa caused massive mudslides on Wednesday that crushed 30 houses. 27 people were killed and 21 are still missing. Weather authorities warned that heavy rainfall from Typhoon Francisco may hit the island from pre-dawn hours through Sunday morning. Town officials are stepping up patrols in affected areas and taking other precautionary measures. Rescue workers were forced to halt their search for the missing following the evacuation advisories. They plan to resume searching as soon as the advisories are lifted.
Now, although the Japanese government has vowed to come up with measures to tackle the radioactive water leak, the situation may be worse than thought, as studies from last year indicate that radioactive water will contaminate the entire Pacific Ocean in just 6 years. Kim Min-ji reports.
This graphic shows the gradual contamination of the Pacific Ocean due to leaks of radioactive water from the crippled Fukushima nuclear plant in Japan. The simulation, which was run by a German marine research institute, shows the entire Pacific waters being polluted by radioactive water in just 6 years. Although the results failed to grab attention when first released last year, experts now fear that the hypothesis may become a scary reality after the Japanese government recently admitted that some 300 tons of radioactive water have leaked into the ocean. Lisei Murata, a former Japanese ambassador to Switzerland, criticized the Japanese government and the operator of the crippled nuclear plant, Tokyo Electric Power Corporation, for its handling of the situation.
TEPCO recently admitted to leaks of radioactive water. The amount is much more that the simulation had taken into account.
The international community has also voiced concerns over the issue, but Tokyo, meanwhile, is busy drumming up support for its bid in hosting the 2020 Olympics.
2020 Tokyo, let's do well.
Murata stressed the fact that Japan does not realize the gravity of the issue is more outrageous.
If Japan can secure the safety of its own nation, it is being insincere in hosting an international event like the Olympics. It should step down.
A Russian nuclear research center had also advised TEPCO to take measures 2 years ago, just after the accident broke out, but Japan turned down the suggestion. It's now been 2 years and 5 months since the nuclear crisis, and Tokyo has finally set out to deal with the problem. However, experts say that it may be too late. The former ambassador also warned that Japan may lose its rights in its exclusive economic zone if it fails to block the leakage into the 200 nautical mile zone.
A fish auction has been held in northeastern Japan that could mark a return to normal.
Studies from last year indicate that radioactive water will contaminate the entire Pacific Ocean in just 6 years.
For some people living in Fukushima Prefecture, the fish put up for bid were caught off a city less than 60 kilometers from the Daiichi nuclear plant. It is the first time fish from the area have been sold since the 2011 nuclear accident. More than 100 wholesalers gathered at 6 a.m. at the Central Wholesale Market in Iwaki. Up for bid were 400 kilograms of marine products. The seafood represented 30% of the entire haul from test fishing conducted on Friday off the prefecture. No radioactive materials were found in any of the samples.
I'm very happy we can deal with locally caught fish again.
The marine products were then delivered to retailers around Fukushima Prefecture. The fish have been put on sale with a certificate showing radiation test results.
I have not eaten locally caught fish for almost 3 years. I came early in the morning before the fish was sold out.
Japan's Prime Minister says he will work to dispel rumors about contaminated seafood being caught in waters off the country's northeastern coast. Shinzo Abe made the pledge while visiting a fishing port in Fukushima Prefecture. Abe was in Soma City, where a fishery official explained the experimental fishing that resumed on September 25th. Fishing was suspended in waters off the damaged nuclear power plant after radioactive wastewater leaks were discovered. Abe sampled some of the fresh catch.
I want people across Japan to know that seafood caught off Fukushima is good and safe. I will work to dispel the rumors.
Abe later visited another town affected by the 2011 earthquake and tsunami. The townspeople have agreed to move to higher ground. He told residents living in temporary housing that his government will do its best to rebuild Fukushima. He called on them to help with the undertaking. Abe then visited a kitchen utility factory that resumed production in a former no-entry zone. The Prime Minister has visited areas affected by the March 2011 disaster almost every month since he took office.
Studies from last year indicate that radioactive water will contaminate the entire Pacific Ocean in just 6 years.
Japanese government officials have been helping their local counterparts prepare for the event of another nuclear accident. They're trying to ensure the safety of people who would be central to such plans. They say bus drivers who would drive residents to safety should not be exposed to more radiation than the general public. Government officials are helping municipalities within 30 kilometers of a nuclear plant drop their evacuation plans. They set the yearly exposure limit for drivers at 1 millisievert. Government officials will ask transport companies to help them find ways to evacuate areas in the event of an accident. And personnel from Japan's self-defense forces are expected to make some other suggestions. Government officials are taking other steps too. They say they'll show municipal workers how to take iodine tablets. They say that can help prevent people from absorbing radioactive substances. The plan is to distribute the tablets to households within 5 kilometers of a nuclear plant.
When a worker saw danger at the Hanford Nuclear Reservation in Washington State, where 56 million gallons of radioactive waste needs to be cleaned up, he said something. Then he was fired. Now he and a second whistleblower explained to Carter Evans why they think they've been targeted for retaliation.
You clearly don't know who you're talking to, so let me clue you in. I am not in danger, Schuyler. I am the danger. A guy opens his door and gets shot, and you think that of me? No. I am the one who knocks.
For more than a decade, Dr. Walt Tamasitis has raised questions about design flaws at this $13 billion nuclear waste treatment plant under construction at Hanford. It's what he was paid to do.
My job was to point out if there was a problem, to identify the problem, and offer solutions to it.
Earlier this month, Tamasitis was called into a special meeting with a manager.
He says, today's your last day. Give me your badge, your BlackBerry, pack your things up, and we'll escort you to the door.
Were you surprised?
Shocked.
Did they give you a reason?
They just gave the reason that we need to cut back.
It was the end of his career with project subcontractor URS. But his concerns about the potential for a radioactive explosion at Hanford persist.
If the explosion was severe enough, would be released to the public. It would be very similar to the explosions you saw at Fukushima.
That's how bad this could be.
That's how bad it could be.
Tamasitis explained his concerns to Congress in 2011.
They include the trapping of explosive hydrogen gas in the waste, which can lead to fires or an explosion.
As a result, the federal government halted work on a key part of the facility.
So they basically stopped construction because of the red flags you raised?
Yes, sir.
His testimony was truly crucial.
Oregon Senator Ron Wyden verified Tamasitis' claims, and he says his firing sends a clear message.
It signals to all of the others who might be concerned about safety issues that they can be muzzled. Their job's not going to be safe. That's unacceptable.
It has an overwhelming chilling effect.
Donna Bushy is manager of environmental and nuclear safety at Hanford. She and Tamasitis have sued for whistleblower protection. She told me she's now feeling the heat.
The fact that he was terminated, it sent a resounding message to me.
And you feel you're next to go?
Absolutely, I do.
Let me show you the document that URS wants me to sign. It says in a nutshell, give us total legal immunity and you get your severance pay.
You have to give up your whistleblower claim against him.
Correct, exactly. Exactly. And I don't plan to sign it.
His case goes back to federal court next month. URS would not discuss personnel matters, but in a statement said it encourages its employees to raise any concerns about safety.
You think it was retaliation?
Oh, retaliation, clear retaliation.
Just last month, Energy Secretary Ernest Moniz issued a memo saying we must not deter, discourage, or penalize employees for the timely identification of safety, health, environmental, quality, or security issues. Less than 2 weeks later, this nuclear engineer with 44 years on the job found himself out of a job. Carter Evans, CBS News, Richland, Washington.
Recent heavy rains in Japan are creating more problems for workers at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant. Rainwater has accumulated in containment areas around tanks storing radioactive water, and it's spilled outside those areas. Some of the spilled water contained unsafe levels of a radioactive substance. NHK World's Masaki Otake reports.
Workers at Fukushima Daiichi have been struggling for months with leaks of contaminated water. Now they're dealing with another problem, rain. They saw a heavy downpour last week during a typhoon. And on Sunday, another storm brought more than 100 millimeters of rain. All that water built up inside barriers surrounding tanks that store contaminated water. Workers discovered it had flowed over the barriers at 11 spots. In 6 areas, they detected levels of radioactive strontium above the government safety limit. The highest reading was more than 70 times the standard. Now the workers are trying to find out whether some of the water flowed through ditches and into the Pacific Ocean. The barriers are designed to contain any tainted water that leaks from the tanks. The walls are fitted with drainage pipes. Initially, whenever it rained, workers opened the pipes to discharge rainwater. But in August, they found that 300 tons of highly radioactive water had leaked from one of the tanks. It traveled through a pipe to the area beyond the barrier. Workers decided to shut off all the pipes and pump out any water that collected inside the containment area. They now check the pumped out water for radioactivity to ensure it meets government standards. Heavy rains are making that job a lot harder. Managers plan to install more pumps around the tanks to make sure they can deal with any amount of water. They say they don't want to get caught out the next time a storm hits. Masaki Otake, NHK World.
The International Atomic Energy Agency has presented the result of its week-long study in Fukushima to Japan's government. The UN nuclear watchdog said the government's 1 millisievert decontamination goal cannot be achieved soon and advised the government to communicate more with the public to get a more realistic view of radiation and related risks. NHK World's Noriko Okada reports.
The disaster at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant in March 2011 spread radioactive substances over eastern Japan. The government ordered more than 80,000 residents in Fukushima prefecture to evacuate as they were living in areas where radiation levels exceeded 20 millisievert per year. The government is conducting decontamination work to lower the levels. The IAEA did the research in Fukushima this month at the request of Japan's government. Inspectors checked the progress of the decontamination and made a preliminary report. The agency said the work was progressing well, but the 1 millisievert goal cannot be achieved soon through decontamination alone. It stressed that the government should try to explain to the public that an individual radiation dose from 1 to 20 millisievert per year is in line with the international standards. It suggested that reallocating resources to the recovery of essential infrastructure would benefit the public, and that more effort is needed to monitor individual doses to decide on decontamination.
You have to select the appropriate value of protection, level of protection, in the range from 1 to 20 millisievert for this specific existing exposure situations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll take a picture.
Japan's government did not specify how it would reflect the advice in its policies.
The government will continue working on the decontamination process along with reconstruction efforts. We also want to deepen our relationship with the international community, including the IAEA, by releasing relevant information.
Many residents have been asking the government to achieve the 1 millisievert level as soon as possible. The IAEA says the balance between benefits and burdens should be considered. Noriko Okada, NHK World, Tokyo.
Welcome back to Early Start. It has been nearly 3 years since an earthquake and tsunami led to a catastrophic meltdown at Japan's Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant. And the work to contain that meltdown continues to this day. Now, amid a series of accidents that have plagued the facility, some of the people tasked with keeping toxic material in check are speaking out. Here's Paula Hancock's.
They are the workers trying to contain the world's worst nuclear disaster in a quarter of a century. A vital and dangerous job. But this worker at the Fukushima nuclear power plant tells CNN he is not treated well. He believes that if he complains, he will be fired. Hiding his identity, as workers are forbidden to talk to the media, he tells me he works 300 meters from the tank where a toxic water leak was discovered in August. We only know the facts when we get home, he claims, watching TV news and reading the newspapers the next day. There's no explanation about what is happening and how dangerous it might be. TEPCO says this leak was not dangerous to workers as they were wearing protective gear, telling CNN they have a system in place to ensure that workers know the general radiation levels in their areas, but they don't pass on all details of incidents to avoid confusion. This is a very complicated issue, says TEPCO's spokesman. Once this kind of trouble occurs, we assess what emergency measures are necessary, and if the accident does not affect workers directly, we don't explain the issue. As a subcontractor and not a direct TEPCO employee, this man is paid $110 a day, $50 lower than an online advert we saw for a similar job with another subcontractor at the same plant. Paid by his company and not directly by TEPCO, he worries the danger money workers are promised for possible radiation exposure is being skimmed off by some companies. Reports of middlemen getting rich from this disaster prompted TEPCO to issue questionnaires to subcontractors and their workers last year. TEPCO says 30% of those who responded said they received no danger pay for working at the plant. Of a dozen companies contacted by CNN, 2 dismissed the claims. Only 1 said it was aware of the issue and was working to ensure fair payment. TEPCO says it's doing the same. This man worked as a subcontractor at the plant immediately after the 2011 disaster. He says he doesn't believe TEPCO and its contractors are interested in fairness for workers. In order to cut costs, he says, TEPCO brought in a bidding system. To win the project, contractors are bidding so low. It's simple, he tells me. Excessive cost-cutting is making workers suffer in terms of payment and health. TEPCO maintains the bidding system is necessary and is making sure bids are adequate without excessive cost-cutting. Hailed as heroes following the nuclear meltdown, these two workers say there is now a feeling amongst some of being underappreciated and underpaid. Paula Hancock's CNN, Fukushima, Japan.
Workers monitoring the spread of toxic water around Fukushima are going to ramp up efforts. Tokyo Electric Power Company officials say they'll check offshore radiation levels around the clock. TEPCO officials on Monday had a panel meeting with Nuclear Regulation Authority personnel. They're studying the impact of radioactive water leaks. Plant workers currently check coastal waters once a day, but experts have called for 24-hour monitoring to allow for better information and faster responses. TEPCO officials said they'll give more details at a meeting next month. And nuclear regulators propose increasing the distance they're monitoring from 300 kilometers to up to 3,000 kilometers. One panel member said the agency will ask ships to collect data to share with Pacific Rim countries.
Rescue workers have resumed their search for missing people on the island of Izuoshima, south of Tokyo. 28 people were killed and 18 went missing last week after torrential rains from Typhoon Wipa triggered floods and a major landslide. Now the islanders are preparing for the arrival of not one but two additional storms. NHK World's Mikiko Suzuki reports.
Authorities on Izuoshima have lifted evacuation advisories that were in effect since Saturday due to heavy rain.
We haven't bathed in 2 days. We want to change our clothes.
About 1,200 rescuers have resumed their search for the missing from last week's landslide. They include police officers, firefighters, and self-defense force units. The islanders have no time to relax. A typhoon and a severe tropical storm are approaching Japan, meaning they have to prepare for another evacuation. Some are busy piling up sandbags to protect their houses and shops from flooding. Workers at this inn are boarding up windows and doors. They're anticipating strong winds and heavy rain.
We heard 2 more tropical storms are heading our way. We are preparing as best we can before another evacuation.
Residents are concerned. 75-year-old Yasukuni Yoshimi lives alone in the district hit hardest by last week's landslide. He's worried the mountain behind his home could collapse again.
I'm worried and I feel unsafe.
Yoshimi says elderly residents must be given enough time to evacuate. One of the storms threatening the island is Typhoon Francisco. It's expected to approach Japan later this week. Authorities on Izuoshima are especially concerned about keeping the residents informed in a timely manner to prevent a recurrence of last week's tragedy.
Many people have turned away from nuclear power since Japan's accident at Fukushima Daiichi. But British leaders are heading in the other direction. They're planning to build a nuclear plant in southwest England. Government officials announced a deal with French firm EDF. They're joining up in Somerset to construct the Hinkley Point C power station.
We're making the market more competitive, we're getting people put onto the lowest tariff, and those are the steps that I think will make a real difference. But no mistake about it, this is a very big day for our country. The first time we've built a new nuclear power station for a very long time in our country.
Executives at French nuclear firm Areva and two Chinese nuclear companies have signed on to the plan worth £16 billion, or about $26 billion. British leaders say the project will create 25,000 jobs. They also hope to provide long-term and safe supplies of electricity. Plant operators will start pumping out power to 6 million households in 2023.
Throughout Japan, depopulation is speeding up. 80% of the prefectures are losing residents, and experts predict that by 2025, even major cities will be affected. Residents of one community are getting creative in their attempts to attract young people. NHK World's Keiko Aso has more.
In the town of Chizu, devils are on the loose, chasing after 60 singles. It's a new style of dating game organized by the local community. They are hoping love will bloom and the couples will stay in the town. The participants get instructions by text on their mobile phones. One message says the girls have to link arms with a man so they won't be caught by a devil. It's a great icebreaker. After the game is over, everyone reveals who they'd like as their partner. It's lots of fun, but also a serious growth strategy for town officials and residents. The event produced 14 couples.
Wow, that was fun. Say something.
It was a good experience. Thank you.
It's just great. 14 couples from here.
Chizu's population now stands at about 7,800. That's a drop of around 15% over the past 10 years. Forestry used to be the town's economic mainstay, but the industry has dwindled because of increasing imports. The town has also launched a new homestay program with local families. Visitors are also guaranteed a place to stay in the event of a natural disaster. This is another way to attract potential residents.
Having a place like this where we can escape to makes us feel more secure.
Chizu is also offering a deal that encourages newcomers to settle there. The Hase family was eager to live in an old traditional house. This one cost about $20,000. The local government paid half on condition they would live in the town for 5 years.
This makes so much more sense than spending hundreds of thousands on a new house.
Officials estimate there are at least 200 houses still standing empty in the town. Newcomers are picky, and most homeowners are reluctant to rent to people they don't know. Officials visit owners and explain they can find good renters. The town also offered financial support. Owners are given $2,000 to clean up their houses.
If the town is involved, we don't mind renting a house. We are happy to help increase the town's population.
Young people move away to improve their lives. It's not right to stop them. So we're offering different kinds of services to bring others in.
Japan is struggling to find ways to stop depopulation. Chizu is a small town deep in the countryside, but its effort could inspire creative solutions throughout the country. Keiko Aso, NHK World, Tottori.
Chernobyl we finally hear. All kinds of cancer went up the next year. Hard to interpret, says OPCS. Can't understand it, well here is a guess. Low-level isotopes from the Ukraine drifted to Wales on the wind and the rain. Painful inspiring, Bengal and Kent. Cancer in Wales is up to 30%. We're breathing strontium, blocking it into the structure of cellular DNA. And each beta decay in an occasional, rather mutational way kills us. Each new labor can see what it means. Radioisotopes alter your genes. Most of death babies will use no rest till the dosimetry's been reassessed. One link, stronger link, thank you to Kent, telling the news of the second event, telling the story of matrix scenes. A radioisotope alter your genes. Re-establishment parcel arrives. Children are dying in front of your eyes. Born with no liquid to get to your brain. Born to a life of incurable pain. Nuclear substances linked into a fate. While you take a pension and slip away. Don't reassure us, those people listening. Yours is a story that's going to be you. Breathing strontium, locking it into the structure of cellular DNA. And each of beat is a K in an occasional long mutational way. Kills us is fighting. The calculus student on cooking books. The fathers of nuclear crime.